Hi, I'm Marie Alford and I am the Head of Dementia Professional Services for the Dementia Centre at Hammond Care. I have the great privilege of leading the Australian government-funded program Dementia Support Australia, delivering support to people who are impacted by dementia anywhere in Australia.
Marie, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had the pleasure of working together previously. We've had lots of discussions about not only the whole aged care side of things, but obviously the conversations needed in dementia care. We couldn't think of a better person to join us in answering some of these questions we've had coming in from our OMA's Upper Source community. So welcome. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me, and I have to say any expertise I've developed is from working with people like yourselves and other people with dementia over the last couple of decades. So it's just great to be here and share stories.
Thanks, Marie. Hey, I thought we might just kick it off with one of the hot topics that we seem to be getting a lot of questions about, and it's more in relation to diagnosing dementia. And even I think when we did our film tour and we were talking to so many audience members, so many people were coming up to us afterwards saying, I think mum, dad, nan, pop has blah, 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 but they won't go and get a test. And if I look at some of the questions we had coming in, Lynn said, are there any other early stages of dementia than just starting to forget things? I'm frightened that I might be getting it, she said. Tara said, at what point do you think you realise your loved one may be showing signs or at the start of dementia, pre-diagnosis? Barbara backed that up by saying, question, what are the early signs of dementia that you saw? What signs should one watch for? What are some of the things in your experience that I guess indicate dementia might be something worth exploring?
Yeah, and it's not surprising that people, as we age, we think about, are we developing dementia? So we forget why we walked into a room, or we know we put the car keys down on the table, but we can't remember that. And that's natural. So if you think of your memory banks, your brain as something that stores all this information from the day you're born to the day you die, that's a lot of stuff in our heads. And so as we age, the ability to retrieve those memories becomes harder. Now, I'm not a medical practitioner, but I would always say if anyone has any concerns, either about themselves or someone that they're supporting or caring for, have a chat to your general practitioner. It's always a really good place to start. But have a think about what else it might be. So it's not always dementia. There are lots of other things that are treatable or modifiable that can mimic dementia. So you might have a urinary tract infection or a delirium as we get older. These things cause confusion. But, improving our diet and those sorts of things. And there's a great focus on risk reduction. And I'm a big believer in reducing our risk of developing dementia. So there are things we can do. But it is about so much more than memory. So some people with dementia, because remembering dementia is just the big term we use for all the different diseases that are clustered under there, like Alzheimer's, which Alzheimer's does present as memory loss usually first. But other people might experience word finding difficulties. There could be some really significant changes in behaviour. It might be that mum has always been quite placid and calm, and now she's really agitated and using a few choice words when she's communicating. And you might be thinking, wow, that's really out of character. That's a sign that it's a good time to have a conversation. And the testing that the GP can do takes you through a range of different elements which look at not only memory, but processing and sequencing and all of those things. So I think the big message is don't be afraid, because the earlier we can get people assessed, the better equipped we are to know what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. Yeah, that brings up so many things that you probably don't associate with dementia. Like you say, we just kind of concentrate on those memory things, but yeah, some other behaviours can maybe be a sign as well. So if we want to then, we've noticed some changes and we want to gain that diagnosis, where do we sort of start? Like we've got Rosie here asking, gaining a diagnosis of dementia can be difficult. What are some of the ways that people can seek that assessment for diagnosis? Without the complexity of, using labels around dementia and things like that, introducing that kind of language with your loved ones.
Yeah, like a health check is something that's freely available through your GP for anyone over the age of 70 and 75. So you can go have a health check. And within that comprehensive health check that does blood pressure and everything else, there is a little mini mental state exam. So that's one of those tests that help to determine, are things changing? And if nothing else, it gives you a baseline for future testing. So your general practitioner is your first point of call. If they have further concerns and you think that it might be warranted for more support, they can make a referral to a memory clinic. Now, that'll be different from where you're listening in Australia or perhaps all over the world. Sometimes they're called memory clinics. You might go to a geriatrician. It might be a particular unit within a hospital that's running those functions. Here in Melbourne, where I am today, it's called a CADAMS clinic, so a diagnostic clinic. There are lots of different places that medical specialists can do further testing, and that testing could involve a range of things like MRIs, but it's that conversation, starting with that conversation. And I would say to people, be cautious of Google. Don't go down the Google rabbit hole and start to look at...
Everybody does though, right? That's the standard. Everybody just jumps on Google and all of a sudden you're going to die tomorrow. Like,
yeah, I have a headache and I go to Google. What could it be?
Yeah.
But, there's some great information, and you've got great services like Forward with Dementia that talks about diagnosing dementia. You've got Dementia Australia. You've got programs like our program, Dementia Support Australia. There's some great resources out there that take you through some tips and things to talk about with your GPs. But don't go down the rabbit hole and self-diagnose, because then you'll get scared and then you won't do anything. And the best thing you can do is reach out and get help early.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. I know one of the things, it is an awkward conversation to start, particularly with a family member or a loved one or your partner. I'm waiting for you to start that conversation with me one day. Let's go and see the GP. But the reality is, how, starting that conversation is the difficult thing, right? How do we actually have those words and say, I think we need to go and have a checkup? I think your suggestion there about that general kind of checkup is really, really good, a general health check. The other thing that I remember we sort of spoke about with a few people was just saying to the person that you'd like to take along with you, even just sometimes going along to their GP appointment might not be a thing you normally do, and it's one of those things where you have to sort of say, look, I think I should come along. Let's have a joint discussion about this. A way around it is just to say, like you said, that baseline, like I don't think you have this yet, but we need to know where both of us are at. Maybe we both go and get a check. If you do it together, then maybe you do a joint appointment. Information will still come out if it needs to be addressed, right?
I love it. I love the idea of going together. And look, it is scary. And I think if you yourself are noticing changes, you can withdraw and start to think, well, if I don't address this, if I don't engage, well, then perhaps it might go away. Yeah. Or you start to isolate yourself from the activities that you love doing. And actually, that's the worst thing you can do, because we know social isolation can increase and exacerbate the progression of dementia. So, it is a partnership, and there's normally someone there who can support, but there's a lot of people living with dementia on their own as well. And I guess a message to them would be, again, reach out and get that help early, because there is help there.
Marie, we had another couple of questions coming in around diagnosing dementia. Andy asked, how do we manage denial of the condition by the person who has the formalised diagnosis? It's quite distressing for all. Carol, also a similar sort of line, said, how do you accept a diagnosis of dementia when the person refuses to believe that they have it? Yeah, Ingi says, my 78-year-old mum is showing minor signs of memory loss, mild confusion and excessive irritability. She regularly attacks me verbally, then pushes me away for several weeks. How do I get help? Where do I go? Again, I think that's one of the things about de-stigmatising dementia assessment. How can we make it something that we're not so fearful of? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, such great questions. And, I really feel for both people who are going through this and seeking a diagnosis, but also their family members, because, you think about it, if you're unwell, you go to the doctor and, you might get a diagnosis of cancer or something, and people seek help. But dementia, we get so scared. Yep. We're really worried about, what does that mean? What is the end state going to look like? And we forget that many people live well with dementia for a long time, and that early treatment can actually empower us to do that. And, you know, through your videos of Omar, we saw joy and happiness and connectedness. And okay, not every day is good, and we get that. But there are still opportunities to create memories and enjoy life and connect with people. And so, you know, you can't force someone to accept a diagnosis, and people will come to things at their own time. It's about being gentle and supportive and providing, you know, environments that allow them to live well. And for the woman who was talking about her mother who's verbally abusing her, you know, imagine how scared her mum is. And, you know, I really feel for this daughter who's only trying to help. And then I think, gosh, what am I going to be like one day when it's me and my kids are trying to help me? It'll be like, no, thank you. Do not tell me what to do. I'm your mother. So, you know, you understand why this is happening, but it is hard. And that's where peer support, peer networks and chatting with people and getting advice about what they've been through is so important.
Yeah, great advice. I think that's the one thing that we missed initially too, was trying to surround ourselves with a good sort of peer network that, you know, we could have those awkward conversations or questions with other people. And I think, you know, just getting ideas for how to address it is fantastic. Yeah, great.
Every family is impacted, aren't they? You know, I think if you had a dinner party, it'd be a topic of conversation. We should talk about it a lot more.